Edric found the letter on the last day of summer, tucked inside the cover of his wife's household ledger. The one he had finally opened, after 14 months, because the pantry stores needed counting, and he could not justify leaving that job to grief forever. The envelope had his name on it in Scylla's hand. He sat down at the kitchen table and did not open it for a long time. When he did, it was not long. 3 sentences. Her handwriting was firm and unhurried, the way she had been about everything that mattered. There is an orc woman who helped me in my last winter without telling you. She would not let me say. Her name is Mara. She will come to your door in autumn to repay what she feels she owes. Don't turn her away, Edric. Just let her in. That is all I am asking. He read it twice. Then he folded it along its original crease and set it on the table beside the cold stove. He did not know what to do with the fact that Scylla had arranged one more thing. He was not sure whether to be grateful or quietly undone by it. He sat in the kitchen for the better part of an hour, and then he got up and counted the pantry stores, because the work was still there, and it had always been easier to move than to feel. 3 weeks later, in the gray of an early October morning, someone knocked. She was not what he had pictured, though he had not pictured anything in particular. She was tall, nearly a head above him, and broad across the shoulders, green-skinned and tusked, with a long gray-streaked braid that had been wound up against the weather and was coming loose at the side. She carried a canvas pack that had seen hard years. She looked like a woman paying a debt she had not exactly chosen, standing at a stranger's door in the cold. "You're Edric," she said. It was not a question. "I am," he said. "I'm Mara." She paused. "Scylla asked me to come." He had the letter in his coat pocket. He touched once, through the cloth, then stepped back from the door and said, "Come in." She stood in the kitchen doorway a moment, the way a person does when they are trying to read a room without being caught at it. She took in the cold stove, the single plate on the drying rack, the general stillness of a house that had been lived in by one person for a long time. She set her pack down near the door and did not remark on any of it. "I can pay for the room and work," she said. "I know herbs and growing things, and I can fix a dry stone wall. Your Westfield boundary needs it." "I noticed," Edric said. "I'm not asking for charity. I didn't offer any." He moved to the stove and began building a fire. "Sit down if you want. Tea first, wall tomorrow." She sat. Neither of them said much that first evening, and it turned out they were both comfortable with that. Mara drank her tea and looked out the window at the field. Edric answered a few of her practical questions. Which barn, which bed? Was there a kitchen garden? In the same plain way she asked them. By the time the fire had taken the chill off the room, the silence had settled into something that was not uncomfortable so much as cautious. 2 people agreeing, without discussing it, to wait and see. The west wall took her 4 days. He watched her work from a distance on the first day, not intending to stare, and she did not acknowledge that he was watching. By the 3rd day, he was passing her stones without being asked, and they had worked out a rhythm without ever arranging one. The boundary wall she left behind was better than anything he had built in 40 years. Working stone. He told her both, and she looked at the wall rather than at him and said, "Yours wasn't bad." It was, he understood, considerable compliment. October moved into November and she stayed on. The kitchen garden had been untended since Scylla's illness, and there was more work in it than a week could hold. After the garden there was the south-facing herb bed to clear and relay, and after that the barn roof showed a weakness she had noticed in passing. Edric stopped asking when she was planning to leave. Mara stopped framing her work as repayment of a debt. Somewhere in the turn of the month, without either of them holding a meeting about it, she moved from the small back room to the larger one at the end of the hall, because it had a south window and she slept badly in the dark, and he had no reason to say no. The house stopped echoing. That was the thing he noticed. First, not warmth exactly, though there was warmth, but the specific quality of the silence had changed. There was someone else breathing in the building. There were 2 sets of boots at the door. When he came in from the cold, was often something on the stove, and when she came in from the cold, there was often something on the stove, because it had begun to seem reasonable to make enough for 2. He did not examine any of this too carefully. He had learned, late in life, that some good things only hold still if you don't stare directly at them. She had not said much about her own life. He had not pressed her. What he understood was this. She had made her way alone for a long time, moving from valley to valley the way useful people do when no place has quite decided to keep them. She had an herbalist's knowledge that would have earned her a respected place in any town that hadn't looked at her face first and made its decision before she opened her mouth. He knew the shape of that, the closed door, the averted eye, without needing her to name it. He had watched it happen in his own village. And he had not done enough about it when Scylla was alive, and he was not inclined to apologize for it now, since apologies without change are just sound. What he could do was set a second plate, so he did that. In November she mentioned, almost as an aside, that there was a supply of dried betony and wood avens in her pack that she'd been meaning to process if he had a corner of the kitchen she could use. He cleared the long table. She was still at it after dark, sorting by stem, and he lit the lamp without asking and put tea at her elbow and went back to his chair. She looked up once, briefly, and said nothing. That was fine. His daughter Nessa arrived in the second week of December, having written ahead to say she was coming for the winter. Edric had written back to say he had a lodger, a woman named Mara, who was helping with the property, and he hoped Nessa would be civil. He had received no reply, which told him everything he needed to know about the conversation that was waiting at the door. Nessa was 41, sharp-eyed, and loved her father with the specific ferocity of a person who had nearly lost him to grief. She had been worrying about him from 60 miles away for over a year. She had not expected to find the stove lit and the kitchen warm and her father sitting across the table from an orc woman, laughing. She stopped in the doorway. Mara had said something dry about the way a village herbalist 3 valleys over had mislabeled his entire stock of elderflower, said it with the flat precision of a professional confronting genuine incompetence, and Edric had laughed the way he used to laugh, from somewhere real, his shoulders shaking. He was still laughing when Nessa appeared, and his face when he looked up was the face Nessa remembered from before, the one she had thought was simply gone. "Nessa," he said, collecting himself. "Come in out of the cold. You've missed supper, but there's soup." Mara stood, not out of deference, Nessa sensed, but because she was practical about spatial courtesy, and said, "I'll set a third bowl." She said it as though this were an unremarkable thing, which perhaps it was by now. Nessa sat down. She looked at the kitchen, the 2 pairs of boots, the herb bundles drying on the south wall, the lamp burning warm over the long table. She looked at her father, who was still settling from that laugh, at ease in his own kitchen, in a way she had been frightened he would never be again. She looked at Mara, who was ladling without asking anyone's preference and had the look of a woman who had decided, some weeks ago, that she was allowed to know where things were kept. "Thank you," Nessa said, meaning several things at once. Mara set the bowl in front of her and said, "The bread's a day old, still good." She sat back down and picked up her own spoon. Outside, the first snow of winter had begun to fall, soft and even, laying itself across the valley without urgency. Inside, the stove ticked with warmth, plates on the table, and the old stone house holding 3 people in its quiet. No longer a place that echoed, but a place that had, in the way of the best and most unexpected things, become a home.